I used to think that if I gave enough, my family would finally see me as a real member, not just a walking ATM. But then, on my niece's birthday, surrounded by pink balloons and laughter, my brother threw me a scornful glance and scoffed. "You'll always be a loser." He forgot one thing. Every cake, every gift, every single decoration at that party was paid for by me. So, I quietly turned away and let them figure it out on their own. 2 days later, I checked my phone. 27 missed calls. And that's when it hit me. For the first time in my life, my family never needed a son, never needed a sibling. They just needed a wallet that could walk. But this time, I'm not coming back. I stood at my parents' doorstep, one hand clutching the carefully wrapped dollhouse, the other weighed down by a bag of gifts for my niece. Inside, the sound of children's laughter mixed with the cheerful melodies of a birthday party. Pink balloons tied to the railing swayed gently in the breeze, and a glittering sign hung high above the door. "Happy birthday, Princess Clara!" I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door swung open, revealing my mother in her familiar pastel cardigan. The warm scent of vanilla cake drifted out, but before I could even greet her, the smile on her face vanished. "We don't want you here today." I blinked. "What?" And then, from just behind her, came a voice I knew all too well, dripping with mockery and disdain. "This place isn't for losers." Ronald stepped forward, arms crossed over his chest, a smug smirk spreading across his face. The words hit like a slap to my face. Before I could respond, he shrugged, sighing theatrically. "Why are you even here? You think Clara cares about you? Stop embarrassing yourself and leave." I had heard these words my entire life. Family dinners where I was left out of conversations, holiday gatherings where their eyes would skim over me as if I weren't even there. They had always seen me as an outsider, someone unworthy of their pride. My gaze shifted past my mother to my father, who stood behind her, avoiding my eyes like he wanted no part in this. My mother just sighed, looking down as if she had expected this to happen but had no intention of stopping it. I tightened my grip on the gift bag, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I haven't contributed anything to this family?" Ronald scoffed. "What? You think your little handouts mean anything?" A memory flashed in my mind. Just 6 months ago, Ronald had stood at my door, his face tight with worry. "Please help me. Clara's school fees are due, and I'm short on cash. It's just temporary, you know that. If it were me, I'd do the same for you." I had transferred the money that same night, no questions asked, no hesitation, and yet here I was, a loser in his eyes. I looked at him for a long moment, then slowly turned away, walking toward my car. I set the gift bag down on the passenger seat, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. For a brief second, I hesitated. Should I go back, walk in, ignore their insults, just for Clara? But then Ronald's voice echoed in my mind again, laced with contempt. "This place isn't for losers." I took a deep breath and started the engine. The party, the decorations, the gifts, all of it was funded by me. Let's see how they manage without me. 2 days later, when I checked my phone, I saw 27 missed calls. I didn't turn on my phone for 2 days. Not because I didn't know what was happening, but because I wanted them to feel it. 2 days ago, I walked out of Clara's birthday party with the gift bag still untouched on the car seat. I didn't pay the bill for the party, I didn't leave a single cent, and I knew that had sent shockwaves through the family. When I finally turned my phone back on, the screen flooded with notifications. 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, 32 text messages. I leaned back in my seat, raising an eyebrow as I scrolled through the barrage of texts. "Mom, you're being childish. Ronald didn't mean it that way. Call me back." "Dad, be an adult, son. You know how family works." "Ronald, are you serious? Grow up." I let out a dry chuckle. Grow up? Funny how that came from the man who spent money he didn't have to throw an extravagant party and then expected me to foot the bill afterward. But it was the last message that made me pause. Vivian, Ronald's wife. "I'm sorry. I don't agree with what happened. Please, call me when you can." I frowned. Vivian had never reached out to me privately before. She always followed Ronald's lead, staying quiet while he manipulated everything. But something about her message felt different, urgent, desperate. I typed back a simple response. "Why are you apologizing?" The typing bubbles appeared instantly, then a message came through. "Vivian, because Ronald is losing it." I narrowed my eyes. "Losing it? How?" "Vivian, the money is running out. He was counting on you to cover the party. When you didn't, he snapped. I mean, really snapped." I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. I had suspected from the start that Ronald had spent beyond his means, but hearing it from Vivian was amusing in its own way. I responded casually. "So what's he planning to do now?" There was a long pause before her reply came in. "Vivian, he has to sell the car." I raised an eyebrow. The car. The brand new sports car that Ronald had always bragged about, the one he used to mock me for not owning. I could still hear his words crystal clear. "A real man drives a luxury car, not some old piece of junk like yours." And now? Now he had to sell it to clean up the mess he made. A small laugh escaped my throat. At last, he was facing the consequences of his own actions. I didn't feel sorry. Not even a little. My family had always treated me like a bank, not a person. They didn't call to check on me after the party. They didn't text to apologize or express regret. No, every single message was about the fallout of me not paying for everything. I leaned back in my chair, unlocking my phone again. Missed calls from Mom, long-winded messages from Dad, accusatory lines from Ronald. They all carried the same demand. Come back. Fix this. Keep paying. But I wasn't that person anymore. I set my phone down, crossed my arms over my chest, and exhaled slowly. Let's see how they survive without their failure to bail them out this time. I didn't receive a single call or message from my family for an entire week after that. That silence, for me, was a luxury. But I knew it couldn't last forever. And as expected, one evening, while I was lounging on the sofa with a glass of whiskey in hand, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ronald. It wasn't my parents. Vivian. I set my glass down and slowly picked up the call. "Talk." Vivian let out a weary sigh on the other end. Her voice sounded exhausted. "Ronald has officially lost everything." I raised an eyebrow and leaned back into the couch. Define lost everything for me. She hesitated for a second, then sighed again. "He sold his car, but it still wasn't enough to cover the birthday party debt. So he turned to blaming Mom and Dad, saying it was their fault for not forcing you to help him. Last night he was screaming in the house for hours." I couldn't help but smirk. "I'm guessing Mom tried to defend him like always?" "She did," Vivian admitted. "But this time was different. This time there was no one left to blame. You weren't there to clean up his mess. And when no one was left to shield him from the consequences, Ronald completely lost control." I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. A part of me had always been waiting for this day, the day Ronald would finally have to face the consequences of his own actions. But then, Vivian said something that made me open my eyes. "Clara and I are leaving." I sat up straight. "What did you just say?" "I can't take it anymore." Her voice trembled. "He started taking his anger out on me, on Clara. Not physically, but with his words. Sharp, cruel words full of blame. I don't want Clara growing up in an environment like that." I was silent for a few seconds before I asked softly, "Do you have somewhere to go?" "My sister agreed to let us stay with her," Vivian answered. "I've already packed everything. We're leaving in the morning." I sighed, feeling something strange stirring inside me. I had never truly believed Vivian would have the courage to leave Ronald. She had endured him for so many years, always standing by his side, even when he was so clearly in the wrong. But maybe finally she had realized that life couldn't revolve around a man who refused to take responsibility for himself. I took a slow sip of whiskey and let out a quiet chuckle. "Welcome to freedom." Vivian gave a soft laugh over the phone, but her voice was still heavy. "Thank you. And thank you for not coming back." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" If you had gone back and kept supporting him, Ronald would never have changed. He would have kept relying on you, kept manipulating everyone, kept dragging us all down with him. She paused for a moment, then said quietly, "You didn't save him, but because of that, you saved us." I sat there in silence, feeling a strange warmth spread in my chest. For the first time in my life, someone in my family truly understood me. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I saw one last message from Vivian. "We're gone. Thank you again." I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing a simple response. "Take care." And as I set my phone down, I couldn't stop the small smile that formed on my lips. Ronald had lost everything, but this time I didn't feel pity. I only felt free. Vivian left with Clara. Ronald lost everything: his car, his wife and child, and the golden child status he once held in our parents' eyes. And yet, I was still getting calls from Mom. At first, her tone was the same as always, full of blame and family obligations. "You can't treat your brother like this. Family is supposed to help each other. No matter what, he's still your brother." I didn't respond, but she didn't give up. Every day, a new message. Every week, a missed call. And then, her tone started to change. From blame to persuasion. From persuasion to pleading. And finally, one night, while I was reviewing an important contract on my computer, my phone screen lit up with a message containing only 3 words. "Ronald needs help." I leaned back in my chair and laughed. Of course, I had seen this coming. Ever since I walked out of Clara's birthday party without paying, my family had been trying to pull me back in. But now, things were even worse for Ronald. No car, no wife, no child, and most importantly, no money. I didn't reply, but just a few minutes later my phone rang again. I glanced at the caller ID. Mom. I sighed and picked up. "I knew you'd call," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Ronald is struggling," she said immediately, her voice shaky. I raised an eyebrow. "Struggling how?" "He's lost everything, honey. He has no job, no savings. Your father and I have helped him as much as we could, but we don't have much ourselves. Can you just help him this one time?" I let out a quiet chuckle and shook my head. "Mom, I've helped him this one time more times than I can count." "But this time is different," she pleaded. "He's truly desperate." I took a deep breath, crossing my arms. "Mom, let me ask you something." She hesitated. "What?" "When Ronald kicked me out of Clara's birthday party and called me a failure, what did you say?" A heavy silence followed. "What did you do?" I pressed. She swallowed hard. I didn't know things would go that far," I scoffed. "No, you did. You were standing right there. You saw everything. And you didn't say a single word. But Ronald what?" I cut her off, my voice cold. "Now that he has no one left to turn to, you expect me to come to the rescue? No, thank you." She let out a weary sigh, almost begging. "You can't just abandon your brother like this." "Mom, he abandoned me first," I said firmly. I could hear her sniffle, but I no longer felt guilty. In the past, just the sound of her trembling voice would have been enough to break me, to make me go back and help, even when I knew I was being taken advantage of. But not anymore. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, for the first time feeling genuinely at peace. "But this time, I'm not coming back." And then, I hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment. For the first time in my life, I was the one who ended the call first. And for the first time, I felt completely free. I hung up first, for the first time. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. There was no weight of remorse pressing on my shoulders. No more fear that I would be seen as the bad guy for refusing to help. But even though I had cut off Ronald and my parents, one name still lingered in my mind. Clara. She wasn't at fault. She didn't choose to be born into a family with a father like Ronald. She didn't choose to be caught in the selfishness and greed of those around her. I scrolled through my messages, ignoring the countless missed calls from my mother and the angry texts from Ronald. And then, I stopped at the one name I actually wanted to reply to. Vivian. I opened our chat, my finger hovering over our last conversation. The last message she had sent read, "We're gone. Thank you again." I started typing a new message. "I want to help Clara, but I'm not giving Ronald another cent. Can we talk?" The typing bubbles appeared immediately, then disappeared. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Vivian was calling. I picked up. "Hey." She let out a relieved sigh. "Thank you for thinking about Clara. I don't want anything from Ronald either, but I won't lie. It's not easy raising her on my own." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I don't want Clara to suffer just because she has a terrible father. I have a proposal." "What is it?" I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on my computer screen. "I'm going to set up a savings account for Clara, a fund just for her education, her real needs. But only you will have control over it. Not Ronald, not my parents." There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle from Vivian. "I knew you wouldn't turn your back on Clara, but I didn't dare hope you'd be this thoughtful." I let out a dry laugh. "I'm not turning my back on family, Vivian. I'm turning my back on the people who've treated me like a walking ATM." She sighed. "I get it, and I agree. But are you sure? You don't owe Clara anything." "No, I don't, but I want to do this because she deserves better." After the call, I set up the savings account just as I had promised. For the first time, I helped without feeling used. I helped because I wanted to, not because someone guilt-tripped me into it. A week later, I received a message from Vivian, along with a picture of Clara. She was hugging a new doll, her face lit up with a beaming smile. "Thank you. You're the best in the world." I stared at the picture for a long time before a genuine smile formed on my lips. Ronald may have lost everything, my parents may never change, but Clara, she still had a chance, and I would do whatever I could to make sure she never had to rely on someone like Ronald to get what she needed. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't just feel free. I felt at peace.